You know, when we think about defending ourselves, we usually picture something incredibly tangible, like a locked door, right?
Yeah, so yeah.
Or a tall chain link fence, maybe a loud car alarm. You see the threat, you put up a physical barrier, and boom, the problem is solved. You can literally knock your knuckles against the solution.
Right, because it's structural, it's measurable, and, I mean, most importantly, it's highly visible to everyone involved.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
then you step into the invisible world, you know? Your mental space, your emotional bandwidth, your personal energy, and suddenly that heavy deadbolt on your front door just it doesn't do a single thing.
No, it really doesn't.
And that totally permeable landscape is exactly what we're dissecting today in this deep dive. We are taking these highly intriguing notes that you provided us, and we're going to tear down exactly why so many of us fail at energetic defense.
Yeah, it's such a crucial topic.
It really is. Specifically, we're looking at the framework outlined by author Arin Murphy-Hiscock. The text is Protection Spells. Clear negative energy, banish unhealthy influences. And we are zeroing in on the specific subtitle here, which is Shields of Spirit, the Art of Banishing and Protection.
And the central thesis here, the reason we often feel so completely drained despite thinking we've, set our boundaries, is that we treat invisible psychological threats as if they operate by the rules of physical objects.
Right, like trying to put a lock on the wind or something.
Exactly. We try to put a deadbolt on a shadow. And whether you look at Murphy-Hiscock's work through the literal lens of, like, metaphysical spell work, or if you view it as this deeply resonant psychological metaphor for modern boundary setting, the mechanics of where our defenses fail are completely identical.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to figure out why the defense fails, we have to define what the defense actually is in the first place. So the very first phrase in your notes is shields of spirit. Now, as a modern tech-literate society, my immediate instinct is to map this onto a digital firewall.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right. Because you don't sit there inspecting every single packet of data coming into your Wi-Fi router. You'd go completely out of your mind.
You really would.
You have a firewall running silently in the background, just blocking the malicious code so you can go about your day. But, and here's where my firewall analogy hits a bit of a snag, and I want your take on this. A firewall drains processing power.
Yeah.
It eats up battery. So if we're talking about a shield of spirit, is this a passive barrier? Or does that word spirit imply something that requires, like, a massive amount of active energy to maintain?
That is the exact friction point the text is highlighting. I mean, think about physical armor, right? A steel shield is entirely passive.
Right.
A piece of steel doesn't have to wake up in the morning and consciously decide to be steel. It just exists. But elevating the concept to a shield of the spirit implies a fundamental shift in physics.
Okay, how so?
Well, you are protecting your core essence, and doing so requires active, continuous battery-draining energy. It is not a set-it-and-forget-it installation.
So the exhaustion people feel when they say, I'm setting boundaries, that isn't them doing it wrong.
Yeah.
The exhaustion is the literal cost of running the firewall.
Precisely. And what's fascinating here is the semantic weight of choosing the word spirit over a word like mind.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because the mind is your software, right? It processes logic, it handles your schedule, it computes daily tasks. But your spirit, I mean, I love this distinction so much in this context. Your spirit represents your fundamental operational capacity. It's your power supply.
Oh, wow.
Right? So if your mind gets tired, you take a nap or you watch a movie. But if your spirit is drained by constant, unmitigated energetic breaches, your entire system just crashes.
You lose your drive, your joy.
Your entire sense of self. Exactly. The author isn't just talking about guarding your daily thoughts. They're talking about guarding the actual generator that keeps the lights on.
I see the logic, but man, that paints a somewhat exhausting picture for the listener. I mean, if just maintaining the shield drains the power supply, aren't we kind of trapped in a losing game?
How do you mean?
Well, the shield takes energy, the attacks take energy. It feels like you're eventually going to hit zero no matter what you do.
Which is exactly why the text doesn't stop at shields.
Ah.
A shield is only half of the architecture. A shield is preventative. But, preventative measures inevitably fail. Things get through the firewall.
Right, bugs always find a way in.
Exactly. And if you only have a shield, and a piece of energetic malware slips past it, your shield is now entirely useless against the threat that is already inside the house.
And that pivot from prevention to cure is where we get into the rest of the framework. I actually want to jump to the second half of the notes first, because before we talk about how to get rid of a threat, we really need to understand what the threat looks like once it's breached the perimeter.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the notes give us two very specific, very distinct directives. Clear negative energy and banish unhealthy influences.
And they are not synonyms.
Right.
Treating them as synonyms is the trap most people fall into when they're trying to manage their personal space.
Let's talk about the first one then. Clear negative energy. The way I visualize this is like walking into a room that's been closed up for months.
Oh, yeah.
The air is stale, it feels heavy, there's dust all over the floorboards. What do? You throw open the windows, you let a cross breeze in, you sweep the floor. It's a routine environmental reset.
Exactly, because it's an issue of accumulation, not an issue of malice. Energy naturally gathers. You go to a crowded grocery store, someone cuts you off in traffic, and you just absorb a tiny fraction of ambient frustration. It's just dust settling on the mantle.
Right, the dust doesn't have an agenda.
No, not at all.
It's just a byproduct of existing in the physical world. So clearing makes sense. It's maintenance. You run the air purifier, you take a deep breath, you clear the slate. But then we hit the second directive. Banish unhealthy influences.
Yeah.
That is a completely different weight class.
It really is. If we connect this to the bigger picture, look at the precise linguistic pairing the author uses here. Clearing is gentle. It's applied exclusively to energy.
Yeah.
But banish. Banishing is a forceful, violent verb. It's a definitive severing. And the author reserves this aggressive verb specifically for unhealthy influences.
Let's extend that house metaphor then. If negative energy is just stale air and dust, what is an unhealthy influence? Because you don't banish dust.
No, you don't. You banish the toxic black mold growing inside the drywall.
Oh, wow. Yeah, wow. You don't just open a window for toxic mold.
No.
You don't just run an air purifier and hope the mold decides to pack up and leave. You have to grab a sledgehammer, tear open the wall, and forcefully rip it out by the root. Because if you don't, it will actively continue to make you sick. The mold has a source.
That is the critical distinction. An energy is an environmental condition.
Yeah.
But an influence implies a vector. It implies direction.
Right.
It implies something that is actively, perhaps intentionally acting upon you to shape your reality in a detrimental way.
Right.
A negative energy just lingers in the room. An unhealthy influence actively feeds on your power supply.
It raises such a massive red flag for how we navigate our daily lives. I mean, think about how many people are walking around treating mold like it's just dust.
Yeah. This raises an important question for anyone engaging with this material. I would challenge you, the listener, to look at the chronic stressors in your own life right now. Are you currently exhausting yourself trying to just clear an energy when you actually need to banish the influence that is continuously generating it?
That is a staggering trap to fall into. It's the equivalent of running a top-of-the-line HEPA air purifier in a room where the walls are literally rotting from mold.
Yes.
You can run that purifier 24/7. You can meditate, you can journal, you can clear the air constantly. But because you haven't banished the source, the influence is still there, quietly regenerating the toxicity every single time you turn your back.
And that cycle is exactly what leads to the profound burnout we were talking about earlier. You're draining your spirit's power supply by constantly running the clearing protocol, but you are refusing to enact the banishing protocol. You're treating an active influence as if it were passive energy.
Let's pause on that, because making the transition from clearing to banishing sounds great in theory, but in practice, it is incredibly difficult. Which brings me to the middle part of the source notes, the art of banishing and protection.
Okay.
I really want to push back on the author's use of the word art here.
Oh, why does art bother you in this context?
Well, because if we're dealing with toxic mold, I don't want an artist, I want an exterminator.
Right.
I want a contractor with a clipboard and an exact blueprint. If an influence in my life is actively harming my spiritual or psychological well-being, shouldn't getting rid of it be an exact science? Like a straightforward mechanical checklist. Step 1, identify threat. Step 2, execute removal. Done. Calling it an art makes it sound flimsy. It makes it sound like it's open to interpretation.
I totally understand the desire for a checklist.
Yeah.
We all crave a rigid blueprint for boundary setting because, well, a blueprint removes the burden of personal responsibility.
That's true.
If you follow a checklist and it fails, you can blame the checklist.
Yeah.
But banishing a deeply rooted influence from your life, whether that's a toxic dynamic with a colleague, a deeply ingrained self-destructive habit, or an unhealthy relationship, is never a clean extraction.
Because the mold is attached to the house.
Exactly. Ripping out the mold means you have to tear down some of your own drywall. There is collateral damage. It is messy. It hurts. You are dealing with human psychology, emotional attachments, and these invisible energetic ties. An influence doesn't just sit politely waiting to be scooped up and thrown out the door. It weaves itself into your daily routines. It hides behind nostalgia or professional obligation.
So a checklist fails because an influence is dynamic. It reacts to your attempts to remove it.
Yes, and that is why it must be an art. And art requires intuition. It requires practice, nuance, and deep personalization. How you maneuver through the fallout of banishing a toxic element from your life is going to look completely different from how I do it.
Yeah.
You have to feel your way through the architecture of your own boundaries. You have to know which walls are load-bearing and which ones you can safely swing a sledgehammer at.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you strip away the desire for a sterile, one-size-fits-all checklist, the word art actually becomes incredibly empowering. It takes this heavy, burdensome, often terrifying chore of dealing with toxic influences and elevates it to a cultivated practice. It returns the agency to you, the listener. You aren't just a victim reacting to an invasion, you know. You are the artist of your own energetic space. You are learning the medium of your own boundaries.
That's a beautiful way to phrase it. A checklist is dictated to you by an external authority, and art is something you master yourself.
Right.
It requires you to intimately know the canvas, which in this case is your own spirit. You have to know your own power supply, what drains it, what replenishes it, and precisely how much force is required to evict something that has overstayed its welcome.
Let's push this into a practical scenario, just to really test the mechanics of Murphy-Hiscock's framework. Let's say you have a situation where you've identified a persistent drain on your energy.
Okay.
We've established you need the shield of spirit, the active firewall, to prevent new attacks. You've recognized that simply clearing negative energy isn't working because you're dealing with an active, unhealthy influence. Now you have to practice the art of banishing. How does the interplay between the shield and the banishing actually function in real time? Does the shield drop while you banish?
That's the complex part of the practice. Banishing is an inherently vulnerable act. I mean, think about a physical fortress. If the enemy has already breached the gates and is inside the courtyard, locking the gates behind them doesn't help you.
Right, they're already inside.
Exactly. Sometimes, to expel an influence, you have to temporarily alter your defensive perimeter to push it out. You have to engage with the threat.
You have to face it directly. You can't just hide behind the shield and hope it gets bored and leaves.
Right. Banishing requires you to direct your spirit's energy outward, assertively. It is a boundary enforcement, not just a boundary line. The shield says you cannot enter. The banishment says you must leave. They require completely different energetic postures. One is a wall, the other is a wave.
A wall versus a wave. I like that. But it also highlights why we try so hard to avoid the banishing phase. Throwing a wave of energy to force an influence out is confrontational.
Highly confrontational.
It's much easier to just quietly run the air purifier and pretend the mold isn't spreading. We tell ourselves, I'm just protecting my peace by ignoring it.
But as the text clearly implies by separating the two concepts, ignoring an influence isn't protecting your peace. It's just surrendering your space slowly.
Yeah.
True protection, the overarching theme of these protection spells or practices, is a holistic ecosystem. It's the wisdom to know when to hold the wall, when to sweep the dust, and when to summon the wave to expel the rot.
So what does this all mean? When we pull all these granular threads back together, Arin Murphy-Hiscock isn't just giving us a list of spooky-sounding metaphysical terms. This framework is a remarkably comprehensive psychological system for existing as an empathetic person in a highly chaotic world.
It absolutely is. It demands accountability from the individual. It removes the illusion that you can be a passive passenger in your own life and still remain safe.
It reminds us that effective self-care is not passive. It's not just taking a bubble bath and hoping the bad vibes go away.
No, not at all.
It demands the active, battery-draining maintenance of the shield of spirit. It demands the self-awareness to recognize the difference between the daily friction of negative energy that just needs clearing and the deeply rooted, unhealthy influences that require decisive action.
Exactly.
And most importantly, it demands the courage to step up, abandon the comfort of a checklist, and engage in the messy, highly personal art of banishing to reclaim your power supply.
You need a lock on the door, but you also must possess the unyielding willingness to look a threat in the eye and remove it from the premises. A shield only protects what you are willing to fight for.
We've covered some immense philosophical ground today, starting from just a handful of evocative phrases in your notes. We've mapped out the architecture of invisible defense and the heavy cost of maintaining our own borders. We genuinely hope this deep dive empowers you to audit your own energetic landscape, to stop trying to clear out the mold, and to start cultivating your own art form of protection.
But before we officially close the book on today's analysis, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, a concept that builds directly on this architectural framework we've just constructed. We talked at length about the difference between the ambient dust of negative energy and the directed, malicious vector of an unhealthy influence.
The wall versus the wave.
Yes. So my question to you is this. If you were to fully embody this practice right now, whether you view it as casting a literal metaphysical protection spell with clear intent or simply drawing an absolute uncrossable psychological line in the sand of your daily life, look around your current landscape. What is the very first unhealthy influence you would banish?